Hello, I am Baal Kadmon, and I'd like to thank you for watching and or listening to this video. I just want to give everyone, extend my thanks for all the outpouring of support for my previous video, in which I discussed the last 5.5 to 6 months of my life and my battle with vestibular neuritis and binocular vision dysfunction. Which, by the way, I should be getting those glasses any day now, which should really relieve a lot of the symptoms. But thank you so much. Oh my God, the emails, the messages, my goodness, you guys made me emotional. But I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So in this video, I'm going to conclude my discussion on Pardes. I have released video 1 and 2 in which I apply an interpretive model that's usually found in Judaism to text. The first video I did it for Genesis chapter 1 verse 1, and then the next one was Deuteronomy for the Shema prayer or the verse. And in this one, actually, I'm going to be applying it to a New Testament verse. I know it's mostly a Jewish interpretive tradition, but the ground, the core of it can be used with any text, religious, spiritual, philosophical even, so it's not something that really should be relegated to one religion. So, and I've said in my first video that I apply it on pretty much all the texts that I read in some way or another. It depends my intention when I'm reading the text. If I'm just sort of reading it just to get familiar with it, then, I'll just read it straight. Like the other day, I read quite a bit of the Zend Avesta and a lot of the Zoroastrian texts in English. There's some that were translated into Farsi, and I can read that a little bit, but I am by no means even academically fluent in Farsi. But I know enough, But I was reading it, and I didn't apply this interpretive model to it. I just sort of read it straight. If I go deeper into it, then I might do so. But I will say, at some point this year, I will be releasing a course on Zoroastrianism, and I'm going to have quite a bit on like Ahriman Angramanyu and Ahura Mazda, and I go pretty deep into it. Some people have asked me to create something, but it's also a passion project of mine. I think you'll enjoy it. If not, it's out there for the world to see. But I think you'll definitely enjoy that. I don't have a time frame yet for that. So anyway, let's look at how to apply Pardes to John 1, chapter 1, verse 1. And in English, it is, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Now, in the Greek, it's en archi, en hologos, ke hologos en prostonteon, ke theos en hologos. Now, in English, actually, you could probably do the Pardes in English. There's plenty to look at there, but we're going to look at it in its original language. So let's look at the pshat, or the literal meaning of this. So the pshat level, as I said in the previous videos, focuses on the straightforward, literal meaning of the word. So the verse introduces the logos, right? The word, hologos, translated as the word, as sort of this pre-existent thing and is divine. Now the Greek word archi means beginning, and recalls the sort of like the opening of Genesis 1:1, Bereshit. And actually, by the way, that's where we get the word archaic from, archi. This establishes, this archi establishes a parallel between the creation narrative and the role of the logos. So the literal meaning is that the word existed before creation, was in a relationship with God, okay, because it says there, proston theon, and was fully divine, theos en hologos. So this is a theological declaration about the Logos's eternal nature and unity with God. So that is the literal, that already is profound, right? But that is the literal translation of that. And now we move to the next phase, is remes, or the allegorical. And this usually uncovers symbolic meanings, allegorical meanings. So logos, or word, in Greek philosophy and Jewish thought, symbolizes divine reason or wisdom that brings order to chaos. So here, logos allegorically represents Christ as the mediator between God and creation, the divine principle that bridges the infinite and the finite. So that reference to archi, the beginning, sort of ties the idea of divine intentionality at the very root of existence. So allegorically, this verse conveys that Christ is not just the origin of creation, but the sustaining force behind its harmony and purpose. And that is what the allegorical meaning of this verse is. And just to explain a little bit more, the idea that Jesus is the mediator between God and creation is, not uncommon. We have this idea, especially, Carl Jung had in his book, The Answer to Job, in which he really lampoons the God of the Old Testament, and rightly so, stating, he doesn't know what his left hand is doing from his right hand. He's very capricious. He's very sort of out of control, has no self-awareness, and all of these things. The demiurge, essentially, from the Gnostic beliefs. But he says that Jesus essentially came to temper the Old Testament God. So in many ways, and that's why he also bridged the gap, stating, the laws, those are gone now. I'm the new law, right? Essentially. Now, I don't believe personally that Jesus is the fulfillment of the messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. And I say so in my book, The Messianic Mirage. But we're talking about concepts here, right? Now, again, I think Jesus was a great representation of something, but I don't think he was like really the Messiah or anything like that. But again, I covered that in The Messianic Mirage in great depth. But according to this theology, he is the bridge. And it does make sense. And that's what this allegorical level is trying to say. It's hinting at, listen, that word is Jesus. And let's look at the third level, and that is drash, or metaphorical or homiletical, right? And this seeks sort of a moral, ethical, or some type of spiritual lesson, usually. So from a homiletical perspective, logos really, if we were to look at this personally, it's sort of telling us to reflect on the nature of God's self-revelation. So the word being with God, or proston theon, is telling us about an intimate relationship that the believers are called to emulate in their own life, living sort of in communion with God. So the declaration that the Word was God, theos en hologos, really presents us with a challenge to recognize the divinity in Christ and understand how the Word is revealed in Scripture and creation. So this particular level is emphasizing the personal and communal call to align one's life with the Word's truth. Now, again, I'm not saying you should do this. I'm not doing it. I'm just saying, if you were to take this verse and put it through this framework, this is one way you could see this particular verse. Now let's look at the fourth dimension, or sod, or mystical, which helps reveal the esoteric or mystical dimensions. Now, mystically, logos represents the emanation of the divine into the cosmos, right? Sort of similar to the Sfirot and Kabbalistic thought, right? The logos is the active expression of the Ein Sof, the endless light that made accessible to the finite, which created the finite world. Remember, in the Kabbalah, before anything, there was this endless light, the Ein Sof Or, right? So this verse works perfectly with it, because if you look at the Ein Sof, that is light. This is like a primordial light. Now, in Jewish mysticism, or in mysticism in the West, the word is very important, right? Remember, God uses the Hebrew language, right, to create the universe. But he's doing it through this light. So the word, in this sense, becomes the Ein Sof. It becomes that endless light. So when we look at the phrase, the word was with God, proston theon, this reflects that unity of the divine emanation with its source. And the word was God, theos en hologos, really highlights the inseparability of it. So this verse, you could sort of look at it as a kind of meditation on how the infinite enters the finite realm without diminishing its own unity. And it's very much a Kabbalistic concept of the contraction and then the revelation. You see what I mean? So mystically, this verse is just really powerful and has very strong Kabbalistic undertones. So the question is, who informed what idea? I think that a lot of these ideas sort of grew out from the same root. So I'm not sure that the person who wrote John 1:1 was necessarily thinking about the Sfirot or the Ein Sof. Those ideas came a lot later. And I don't think those who came up with the idea of Ein Sof or the Sfirot even really knew John chapter 1, verse 1. But you could see how those ideas can come together, which is very interesting. But in the end, what we're learning from these four levels is that the Logos itself, the Word, is the bridge between heaven and earth. It's both transcendent and immanent at the same time. And it's very similar to Genesis 1:1. When you look at the Hebrew and you look at the mystical stuff, remember I mentioned that the word et contains the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, implying that God used words to create, and logos is that word. You see what I mean? So John 1:1 and Genesis 1:1 are very, very similar in a very general sense. But I love that. I think that's great. So you see, these are just examples on how it can be used. But you see, there's also a lot of wiggle room, right? I mean, there was a lot of wiggle room to interpret this. Anyone could take this and have a completely different interpretation of it. And that is, I don't know if weakness is the right word to use, but this is sort of a vulnerability of this methodology, is that the definitions and the interpretations you make using this framework can vary significantly. So nothing is set in stone. They're all correct. You see what I mean? And when you deal with mystical concepts, in the end, they sort of are correct. They all are correct because they're actually beyond definition in and of themselves. The Logos, we're using all these terms, but if you go deep inside, sort of like in a mystical Christianity, Logos is even though it means word, it's beyond descriptions, beyond words. So I don't want to get too mystical here. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this the 3-part series. Again, thank you for all of your support, and I do say that I have quite a bit coming. I have On the Jinn, I have Set, I have The Watchers. I'm taking, remember, I wrote a book on the watches, but what I'm working on now is, by far, even like 20 times that. Okay, I can't wait to get that out there. But I have a lot going on. So anyway, thank you again for all your support. If I don't speak to you before then, Happy New Year. By the way, December 31st is my birthday. I'm middle-aged. Yeah. Well, I'm happy this year's over. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, speak to you soon. So mote it be.